Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and show us some love and become a sponsor through Patreon. The Friday Power Lunch. Badass women getting things done.
From Network Nova Live, it is May 10th, 2024, and you are on the Friday Power Lunch. Yes, you are. I'm Katherine White, your host, bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, fueling the grassroots community across Virginia, coast to coast, to get things done and make politics fun. And today's theme, I don't know if you're calling it fun, but it is definitely interesting and crazy. Project 2025, what's going on? Or as my mother would say, what the hell is going on? We're talking about a 900-page document put together by conservative billionaires. There's a blueprint for dictatorship. It's like they have nothing else to do. Let's write a 900-page thing that no one really knows. But if you don't believe me, and it sounds nutty, well, today we want to welcome our guest, Andra Watkins, New York Times bestseller. Welcome, and the founder of the Substack, How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. Great. Some of you are fans of hers, and we're so happy to have you in the room, and welcome to our community. And, you know, she has a special gift, Andra, to make really complex issues good for us to be able, she distills down so we can understand what's really going on in this big document. So we're so happy to have her. And then this is the second part. I'm very excited to have in an organizer that we all know from Red, Wine, and Blue, KELSEY LAWRENCE. She, though, got her start saving her local library. That's Saving Samuel. So I want to welcome a nice warm welcome for KELSEY LAWRENCE. And she's also the Young Dems president in North Shenandoah County. So welcome, KELSEY. I'm so excited to talk about this because the stories that we're going to tell today just really shows the links of what's going on with these religious zealots really trying to take over our democracy. But let's get to some show business first. All right, you got your coffee, you got your cup. And I want to say that let's do some show business. If you're new, use the chat to communicate. But if you use it to be nasty, we like to kick you out. We don't mess around. So tell us where you're from, what you're doing, what you're working on, and what's going on with you. And then the after chat, our favorite part, is that we turn the lights down, take our shoes off, and we're able to talk to our guests and talk to each other and share what is going on. So stick around for that for a good 30 minutes. We usually go from 1 to 1:30, and then we get all ready for next week. And lastly, thank you to all the patrons in the room supporting our show. This is very important for our work, so thank you so much. And if you want to support us, we'll put the link in, and this really helps us do our work. So perfect. And lastly, do you remember that we're on Spotify? And if you're out there listening, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So you can listen to us even after this show. We're all kind of ways. We also have a YouTube channel, and you can watch us again. And remember, folks, it's up to us. No one's going to save us. So I know one person that will save us. Let's bring up Finale Norton, co-host. Finale, I'm going to fix my hair, Finale. It got a little bit out of whack. What do you think? Oh, there, that's better.
I think you look great. You just did a really big job if I'm going to save us. But, you know, I do tell people when they ask me, what do you do? What are you doing? I say, look, I'm doing my little piece to save democracy. That's what I do. I'm working to save democracy. So, yeah, I'll take it.
Start with before we get into some other news, I want to start with just reminding people when we talk about what's going on and communicating that this weekend's Mother's Day. And I want to remind that for everybody in the room, how important it is when we talk about these kind of holidays when it comes to Mother's Day and communication, right?
Right. Well, you know what I say, moms are everything, and they're the ones who are the biggest influence on their kids. I'm not a mom, but I've got nieces and I got nephews, and I love them. And I like to think that they listen when I have something to say and that they're respectful to what I have to say as I am to them. So I think I always say kids don't fall from the sky.
Yeah.
We are there to help. They don't. They
Oh,
don't
they
fall.
don't? I
Yeah.
know. I'm wondering. That's not how I got mine. You're right. They don't fall from the sky. But my favorite line is from Abraham Lincoln when he said, "All I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother." And I'll just say that I think a lot of folks, depending on that relationship, there is a lot to say for in this movement when we talk about leaders and almost, this kind of role that we have taken on trying to lead as mothers, as just in general, this women's movement around this. So I'm hoping that when we think about Mother's Day, we remember those special women in our life.
I agree. I agree.
Okay,
I,
but there's also bad mothers, as we say, moms for liberty. Those are bad.
yeah, I guess
I'm
that would.
teasing, but I'm like,
I,
okay. I'm just saying. Don't be
well,
called in.
well, I want to. Well, tell me when you want to talk about the summit. But I don't know if I want to go there before I want to talk about Shenandoah. So maybe we
Okay.
want to talk about the school first.
Well, let's talk about the school and with the summit. Why don't you go ahead? Because we'll talk with Kelsey a little bit too about this.
Yeah. So of course, it's in the New York Times this morning that Shenandoah has two schools, and I hope I get this exactly right. But during 2020, after George Floyd, they changed the names of the schools because they really wanted to start to reckon with racism. And last night, the school board voted to change the names back to the Confederate generals. And if you just think about going backwards and what that means, I do think, as you talk to Kelsey, but when I also talk to Andra, that this is really sort of the signs of what's happening here with Project 2025,
Yes.
as well as white Christian nationalism. It all really does work together.
It does. Going backwards, right? It's just crazy talk. But it isn't because it's real. And that's why we want to address it today. And with that said, I want to make sure that everybody in the room knows about the Women's Summit on June 28th and 29th. It's our signature event. This is our 8th year doing this. And we really believe, again, getting together is really important when we can. It's the best way to build relationships and share information. So this year it's going to be at the Capital One Hall. And on June 28th, our postcard is coming in from all over across Virginia and the nation to come in. And they're so excited to get together Friday night. They're going to have a palooza and have, it's just going to be fantastic. And if you're a candidate and they've wrote for you, you should be showing up and you should be also sponsoring. What's the matter with you? Get in there and sponsor our summit. So, and then on Saturday, a full day, it's going to be fantastic. We have Rachel Bitterkoffer coming for one segment about democracy. We also have Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, Tom Bonnier from Terror Group. We have Senator Hashmi coming to talk about women's health. We're going to have Birth and Color also be involved in that. And we have Repo Rising because it is about reproductive rights, right? But I just have so much to say that you need to go to the website and read what we have so far. But we have, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan will be also coming, and we have tons of partners working with us. So, but the most exciting part I really want to announce is going into Saturday evening, because we can't stop ourselves. It's going to be an all-day event. We're going to be screening Resisterhood, and then we're going to have a fantastic opening at the Badass Broadway Bash that evening in the theater with C.J. Krim, the filmmaker, and Nell Minow, an American film critic, talking about this movement and how art is used, film is used to communicate what the hell is going on. You don't want to miss it. We will have music. We will have also Maggie O'Neill from Vote for Your Daughter. She's a fantastic artist, and we are really bringing it all. And the thread with Chris Matthews with her music and justice music, you won't want to miss it. Get your ticket, and look at our website, and we'll put the link in there. And we're looking for sponsors to sponsor our work. So if you're out there, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, and so if I want to just jump in and say a couple of things.
Okay.
This meeting is really powerful, and I want to give an example. When I went to the rural retreat this weekend, I took my cousin with me, and she participates in some things. But I want to tell you that her attitude and the way that she felt about the work that we all do when she came back is different. She called me today because she's going to do a power circle. And she said, you know, I have a couple of men that I think would really be helpful in our power circle that they ought to come. Can I bring men to my power circle? And so you absolutely can. The reason that I bring that up is that if you can't come to the summit because you're too far away or for some other reason, buy a ticket and send someone that you know. And if you are coming, bring for a ticket for a friend and bring them. They will be inspired and they will understand why we're all so passionate about the work that we do, about no matter who we are and how much we contribute, that we are contributing to saving this democracy. The other thing that I would add is we will not send you home empty-handed. Your mind will be filled, your heart will be filled. You will know that you have something to contribute, and you will walk away because you have practiced and met people, and you will be far more powerful when you leave this than you are today.
I agree. And I want to say too, we're working with after content. I was talking to the author of Democracy Wars, and she just has a new book out, and she's in Boston. She's too far away to come, but she agreed to do a workshop after. So buying that ticket, being in community for public education, part of our partners will be also having content. It's just not a one-off, one day. We understand this work continues. So I'm super excited about the discussion we're going to have today. And we have the room filled with people because this is a concern. And, you know, it's so funny when I was talking about Project 2025 a couple weeks ago to my sister in the kitchen, and I was like, Terry, there is this Project 2025. And I started to talk about it, and she started to like look at me like, sister, you finally lost your mind, because you can't make this shit up. You really can't. And I'm so glad to have Andra with us, Andra Watkins, you know, today with us, and surely talking about why 2025, Project 2025 will ruin your life. And I do think that having somebody with that lens of understanding what it's like to be sort of in a religious experience, because she was, you know, that was her background, and then being able to see that secret signs that are in this policy. I can't wait to hear her distill down on and what these hidden signs are that she sees. And some of us reading it, you know, aren't looking at that. So it's so exciting today to have her kind of unpack that for us.
Yeah. So why don't we bring Andra on so we can get started?
Get started. People are here to hear about all this Christofascism craziness. Thank you, Andra, for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We are so delighted to have you. As Katherine has said, this is Andra Watkins from the Substack, How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. And she's also a best-selling author. But we're going to talk about Project 2025 today. So Andra, thank you for being with us. And you're not around the corner either. So
no, I'm not.
You're not around the corner, but you've been doing this for a while. And I just want to tell folks that we've been talking about it for a while. And I happened upon your Substack, and I was just like, I have to know more. And so I wrote to you and said, would you please come on our show? And you said yes. So why don't we start there with how you ended up writing about Project 2025?
Well, it's interesting. Last year, I was approached by an agent to write a memoir about the confluence of growing up in Christian nationalism, which I did. I went to a Christian nationalist church and school in the 70s and 80s in South Carolina. If you can't tell, I've never lived out of the South until now. And so I wanted to pitch this book to sell it, but nobody bought it. They thought it was too niche and that it wouldn't sell. So last September, I was kind of at loose ends about what to do with writing. And I picked up Project 2025 and started reading it. And the media had been talking about it a little bit, you know, but I was appalled at what I was reading, because I was seeing Bible verses and Bible concepts and things that I learned as a child in this document, buried there. They're not overt. You have to know where to look for them. And so I read the whole thing. And the media continued to talk about it as this wonkish policy document. They weren't talking about how it would impact you as an American. And so I decided to start a Substack to talk about what I see as a Christo-fascist manifesto for creating a theocratic government and replacing our democracy with that. And that's what I believe Project 2025 really is.
Wow.
And that's how
So,
I write about it.
and you do indeed. And so I want to back up for just a minute because I don't want to assume that everybody knows what white Christian nationalism is. And so can you just sort of give us, because you grew up in it, what is white Christian nationalism when we hear it? What does it mean?
Well, I've got a great Substack post on that with Mike Johnson's picture on it called what is a Christian Nationalist? And there are 7 key things that they believe, and I'm probably not going to remember them all off the top of my head, but they believe that America was founded as a Christian nation, that the founders were all Christians. That's what I learned in my school in South Carolina. Our textbooks came from Bob Jones University, so that's the history that we learned. And they don't just believe that it is a Christian nation. They believe it was founded as a white Christian nation because the Europeans who were fleeing oppression, religious oppression in Europe, were all white people. So a subset of them believe that. So that's why the white supremacy movement and Christian nationalists kind of have a synergy. A lot of people don't understand that. They believe that the Bible is the literal, inspired, infallible word of God, that every word of it is true, that every word of it is perfect, and they believe that it is God's law. So God wrote it to govern us. We don't need anything else to govern us. We don't need any other information to be alive. And they believe that our laws should be drawn from the Bible. And any law that violates their interpretation of the Bible needs to be abolished. So, for example, they believe abortion is murder. Therefore, they have attacked women's reproductive freedom with that lens of this is a law that violates our interpretation of the Bible. And so we need to do away with that law and make people live by the Bible because it is God's perfect law. They also, a subset of them, believe that Black and brown peoples were cursed by God, and they point to verses in the Old Testament and the story of Noah to justify their position on that. And they believe that they have a right to disobey any law that violates God's law. And so it's fine with them to attack laws and disobey them, and God will reward them for that. They make the worst politicians because they are taught that they can never compromise. God's law is perfect. So you don't compromise on perfection. You must continue to demand that people respect God's law. And you can't water down God's law. So they're very difficult to work with as legislators or in positions of leadership because they refuse to compromise on anything.
So, Andra, how did this happen? How did this infiltrate the government in this way? And so was it something that was long-term through the Heritage Foundation and other places? How did we end up here?
My pastor joined the Moral Majority when Jerry Falwell Sr. founded it in the late 1970s. My church was one of the original churches that joined it. So there were all of these politically driven sermons that pastors within that movement were teaching in their churches and in their Sunday schools and in my school. So we were told over and over and over again that we as Christians were oppressed, that we were being persecuted, that horrible liberals were overtaking all of our government, our media, our academics, and we needed to rise up and put all of those people out to pasture and reclaim our country for God, because God founded America and it is a Christian nation. And so that's a message that people in that world have been hearing for 50 years or more. In 1979, the Heritage Foundation met and started their first iteration of what is now Project 2025. Every 4 years, they have published one of these things. And so if they had an administration that was interested in implementing some of it, like the Reagan administration implemented about half of the first version of this document. And so the government moved to the right. So then they would move the goalposts further to the right to accomplish more of their positions in the next one. So Project 2025 to me is their Hail Mary. It's, this is everything we want, everything we've been working toward is in this document about what they want America to be. And that is a Christian nationalist, Christo-fascist theocracy as a government.
So one of the things that I find interesting is as you talk about what they believe, there's really no compromise, is that's why cultural issues play so big, because that seems to be why every now and then you can talk about something, whether it's a gay marriage, any things like that probably just take them right over the edge because they see that as something that they must fight against. And we see it as, why are we talking about these culture wars? And for them, that is the thing.
Right. I wrote about that in a post called Sex and the Christian Nationalist, because Christian nationalists do not believe that we can live and let live as a society. They believe sexual immorality, and their definition of sexual immorality is way bigger than yours or mine would be. Mm-hmm. So it's important to know what they mean when they say things, because they're saying one thing and you're interpreting it by what you mean, but they mean something a lot more broad, a lot more prudish than you do. And so they believe sexual immorality causes God to judge nations. And two people having an affair in a city could cause God to destroy the whole city. And so they believe that, and they believe it is their role as Christians to stamp out this sexual immorality in their country. And so that is a big part of what's driving a lot of their culture war issues, is this definition of sexual immorality that they have, and how they believe they are the avengers that need to stamp all of that out.
So I see lots of folks are popping in. I see we're continuing to admit people. So for those who are just joining, I'm talking to Andra Watkins from the Substack, How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. When I first got a hold of this, I was reading an article from yours about how to talk to your friends and family about Project 2025. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think you have a very interesting way of helping people see where it's already infiltrated where we are in our spaces.
Well, I tell everyone to look at red states. It's very easy if you live in a blue state to think this will never happen, but it's already happening. All of these laws that red states are passing to ban abortion, to ban IVF, to ban books, to restrict LGBTQIA plus communities, and ban transgender surgeries and healthcare. All of that comes from this document. And those are all aims in this document. And many times the legislation that they write, the words are the same. They're working from the same playbook. Project 2025 is a public policy document, but they also have a secret tactical document that's behind it that they're implementing. And so I encourage people to look at red states and what they're doing in red states and how successful they've been at implementing these policies. 26 states now, I think, have some restrictions on abortion. So that's half of the states. They've been very successful. So once you start really drilling down into what they've managed to accomplish in red states, I would call states like Florida and Tennessee and Texas Christo-fascist governments already. Mm-hmm. They've managed to do so much. It's really not wise to have the reaction of that'll never happen in America. They'll never be able to do all that, because they're doing it.
Right.
And so that's how I encourage people who want to talk about Project 2025 to use so much of what they've already accomplished in red states.
Ban books, which happen right here in our state of Virginia. We have folks who are fighting at libraries. You'll hear from Kelsey a little bit later about how the library, how they've been fighting. And so it is as simple as ban books. It is as complex as abortion. It is as complex as affirmative action. It is all of these things that we see and that we're talking about. What else would you say to us in terms of how do we have a conversation with folks and not sound like because I do feel like I'm like talking crazy when I'm talking to folks about it. So talk to us a little bit about that, and talk to us about how to understand this other book that you said is this secret code thing that's behind it. How should we be thinking about this stuff?
One of the ways that I try to talk about it with people is I say, look at the things they say. And I break down their language a lot on my Substack. It's, more generally, not just Project 2025. So, for example, when the Missouri State Representative said forced birth can be the greatest healing agent, and people on the left were like, what is the matter with him? That's crazy. That's crazy talk. But he really believes that God brings pregnancies to women to get their attention, to punish them for sin in their lives that they're not telling people about. And so this pregnancy is God's judgment, and it's her job to yield to God's judgment and to learn whatever lesson God is trying to teach her from this pregnancy. And if she does that, then that could be the greatest healing agent for her relationship with God. So they're openly saying these things increasingly out in public. And so I like to call attention to that kind of talk too, because I have 2 whole posts, and since you do political activism at the grassroots, on how to identify Christian nationalist politicians, how to go to events and ask them questions in their language. Because if you don't speak their language, they're not entirely honest with you. But if you raise your hand and say, do you believe the Bible is the infallible, inspired, complete word of God? That's their language. So they're more likely to say, yes, I do, and answer questions so that you can root them out and make sure that we're not voting for people like anymore and not allowing them to be politicians at all.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so that brings me to, I think that's important. And so I'm going to go back and reread that one. I try to keep up with all of them because, and I should say to everyone, if you're not reading this particular Substack on how Project 2025 will ruin your life, you are missing out. And you're going to have to go back and catch up on all the ones you haven't read. There are some that I have to keep going back to because I think they're that important so that I can keep it in my head. And so my question is, as we think about Project 2025, we're having the conversations that we should be having. What else is it that we can do? What else should we be doing? Because you're not there anymore in that world. How do you get out and how do you help guide conversations when you have them so that we can move forward?
I think it's really important, if someone's in that world, they have to want to get out of it. And it takes a lot of work to escape that kind of world. It took me 15 years of reading and study and work on myself and therapy and so much to undo the damage. And I'll be undoing that for the rest of my life. I think it's really important for Christians to be denouncing this movement. And I haven't rejected Christianity just because I rejected Christian nationalism. So I don't believe Jesus Christ would vote for these people. I believe what they teach is the antithesis of what he taught. And so putting people in cages at the border, for example, is the opposite of what Jesus Christ would have done. He would have been at the border ministering to those people and helping those people. And so I think it's really important for Christians to stand up and say, this is not what we are. And we reject this, and we do not believe this. And, they have a right to believe that, but they don't have a right to force me to believe that. They don't have a right to force you to live under laws that they've drawn from their faith.
Yeah. Catherine, hi.
Right in. Hi, Andra. If you don't mind, just on that note, because I wanted to interject, yes, let's talk about the Supreme Court, and what I feel like the bigger thing going on, what we see is the Supreme Court facilitating this, breaking down that wall that we always talked about, between religion and government, right? Or public
Right,
sphere.
because Christian nationalists don't believe in the separation of church and state, except as they believe that separation of church and state protects the church from the state. That's what I learned in that world. Mike Johnson has gone on the record saying that, and several other Christian nationalist politicians have too. And that's how the Supreme Court, the Christo-fascist portion of it, interprets the law. And they will continue to do that.
And the danger we see just today or yesterday was like a teacher fired because of some of these laws that, Supreme Court had passed or upheld, but the hiring, being able to hire or fire somebody if they're gay, for instance, they're teaching in a private or religious school. We just saw somebody fired for that. And I think we're starting really like to see the real ripples of what that looks like. So my question, like, we look at Mike Johnson now working with the Democrats, and we're trying to figure out politically too, in this workspace, we know who he is. What is your thoughts when you see him operating up there, working with the Democrats? Do you trust him anymore, or do you just feel like he's just doing what he needs to do to get his ultimate kingdom going on here?
Him being elected speaker gave me PTSD. He reminded me of every smug, sanctimonious, can I curse? Maybe not. Man that I grew up with in that world. And so looking at him was very triggering for me. I don't trust him at all. I know exactly how a man like that operates, and it is all about his power and him forcing his views and his faith and his worldview on everyone. So somebody like me would be a horror for him, because women are supposed to know their places and stay in it. You're not supposed to use your voice. You're not supposed to challenge them. You're not supposed to speak up. You're just supposed to sit there and smile and say, yes, you're right, man, all the time. And that's how I grew up. Anytime you speak up in that world as a woman, you have a bad attitude. You're a problem. You're not knowing your place and staying in it. You need to be reprimanded. You need to be humiliated. You need to be laughed at. So those are the things that I'm sure he probably does when he deals with people who challenge his authority. I don't trust him at all. He's maneuvering to do whatever he has to do, in my view, to be able to throw the election into chaos if Biden wins.
Yeah, that's my word too. Now, when I was watching that yesterday, I am hoping Hakeem Jeffries and others realize what they're doing, because they let him stay and they controlled that chaos because they want to govern. At the same time, do they know like what is happening? So I'm just throwing that out there when we're looking at all the different states and the laws, and it just seems like a fire hose. What I like about what you do is you take that fire hose and you put it down on actual helping us look at like the state of Tennessee and what that government looks like, and then relating it to that policy. I so appreciate that, because you just make it simplify it for people to really understand what it looks like. Our next guest, for instance, KELSEY LAWRENCE, is going to be a great example of taking something that happened in her town and really being able to make it relatable to what you're talking about. So I think that helps. And also the hope that we've been able to turn around for at least a small part of time, that progress. And then like with the school in Shenandoah being renamed back to a Confederate, it feels like another ending fight. So last words, Finale, and then we'll go.
I do for Andra, because I'm so excited, and I just again want to, you're going to stay for the after chat, so that's fantastic. But for the whole audience, I would just say this is where making injustice public, and this is where talking about this and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And for Shenandoah, we won't quit talking about it so that people will see what is happening, and then we will vote these people out. So Andra Watkins from Substack, How Project 2025 Will Ruin Your Life. Thank you, and we'll see you in the after chat. Katherine.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andra. Oh my gosh, Finale, I'm like, ruin your life, ruin everything. What, these people just take up our bandwidth and time. We could be like saving the world from climate change, but here's the march goes on with just the constant attacks. But I'm very excited that we'll be able to talk to KELSEY Lawrence, because there's a bright spot in our day having KELSEY Lawrence on. Welcome, KELSEY. And again, if you're just tuning in, you're the co-founder of Save Samuels, and you're also an organizer now with Red, Wine, and Blue. So how
I am. Thank you.
we're listening in on this. I mean, how in your mind, talk about Save Samuels. So set this up for our audience. And then I'd love to hear your reaction to this Project 25 and how it relates to what happened in your town.
Absolutely. So last spring, a group formed in my community. A lot of them were members of a certain church in our town. They formed a group called Clean Up Samuels, where they had an event where they filled out over 500 requests for removal forms. These forms are forms you can fill out at any library or school library to have a book removed from the shelves. 500 forms is a huge amount for a rural library like ours. And it was intentional and meant to clog the system so they could go and attack funding. I found out about what was happening because I joined a book club in at the public library. And one of my friends, after explaining what has happened, she said, someone should make a Facebook event. And I thought, oh, that's a simple, easy thing to do. And she ended up being my co-founder. And we made a Facebook event, and it was spread around and kind of went viral in my town. And we showed up to that board of supervisor meeting, and wow, it was hours and hours of hate speech, and there were things done to minimize our voice at that meeting. So it seemed like the majority really wanted the public library defunded over having LGBTQ plus books. And they do that intentionally. They're organized and funded and planned, so, and very loud, but they aren't the majority. They are the minority. And that was the case in our town as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing, and even in Shenandoah and different cases, it is the minority over the majority that we see going on throughout the whole kind of government. You know, this is the goal, is how we can rule the majority, the minority power. So did you find also, when you heard Andra talk about these different trigger words or biblical verses, and you yourself have a background, if you want to talk about that, how maybe you were in tune with what was going on because of what you brought with your unique lens also. Do you want to talk about that?
Absolutely. I grew up in a very white Christian nationalist Republican home. Fox News was on 24/7. I was homeschooled, and unfortunately taught things like the Civil War was about states' rights and not about slavery, which is, as I got older, I realized how really horrific being taught something like that is, and how inaccurate it is as well. And I know I'm not alone in because we had a lot of people from Save Samuels that had this same exact background or had grown up in the church that that opposition kind of was created from. They are homeschool movement as well. And there's a sense of duty, a sense of I've got to help, because we know, like, personally how damaging these ideologies are and the actions that stem from these ideologies.
You know, I think that's important because, and as we were talking about, that religious folk, Christians do stand up. I think they're the most powerful voice when you're talking about these kind of Christo-fascist group, and to be able to recognize the difference. And I think most people maybe aren't really paying attention to that, right? So when they look at the people that show up to this, to defund the library, and then they use this language of pornography again, the trigger of everything being pornography. And I think when the Project 2025, the interesting thing that Andrew brings up is what pornography is to them is different to maybe somebody else. And, you know, in America, we're free, you know, this is the great thing about the freedoms, you know, in a country. So in the next phase of this, what I love about your story and just posting that Facebook post, right? Just making that movement where you really stood up and did something. Walk us through then what happened and how you were able to organize successfully. What worked?
Absolutely. So there's quite a few things that worked. We we got more people involved, and that was through social media, we had weekly meetups at our community center where we focused on just different ways we could lobby. We were at the Board of Supervisor meeting, sometimes all day, to fill up that comment section, to really show, the community loves this library and wants the books on the shelves. It was really kind of just continual presence at these meetings, and we did lots of things to inform the community. We took complicated board agreement documents and made them simple in a graphic that could be shared on Facebook. We crowdfunded the books that they wanted removed, because it ended up being 140 books, and some of them were, picture books all the way up to teenage novels and graphic novels. And we called it the banned bookcase. It's a little suitcase that I rolled around to meetings and to Board of Supervisors events, and we showed the community how child friendly these books were. A lot of organizing is taking the information to the public and in a way that they can see it, and that has to be a group effort. And one of the things that we did to create this group and coalition was we had a culture of yes and a culture of gratitude. People would come to us with ideas, and we would say, yes, that's a wonderful idea. And then they would feel empowered to act, and then to come up with even more creative and wonderful ideas. So it really, having that culture of yes and gratitude, we're able to have innovation.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think too, with the Red, Wine, and Blue that really center on book banning, they seem to be instrumental in helping getting some press, because I think when we're talking about the project, trying to communicate to people what's really going on. So how did that work for you? Did you find that was a really big pivot when the more people found out about it in your community and outside your community?
Absolutely. And Red, Wine, and Blue has allowed me to be able to go and take the information that we learned as a community and apply it to other ones. And I'm so proud to be with an organization that shows up in these areas that are rural, like Shenandoah County last night. We helped organize the rally before that meeting and informed our membership. Rural Ground Game also helped amplify that event. I think it's brave when we're not just organizing in contested races areas, but where people are really experiencing harm. And I'm lucky that I get to be a part of something like that.
It was really great too. And I love this, because to me, this story is full circle. And I'll just say that when you started to have this issue, you reached out to Network Nova on our website. And we were just so happened last year, we were in the throes of doing our Women's Summit. We're like, come, we got you tickets. Yes. We met each other. And then eventually that kind of power of relationship. That's why these events are so important. You connected you to Red, Wine, and Blue. Next thing you know, you're an organizer and you are just taking off. And I think you're going to run for office someday, I'm just going to say. But what's important too now, so has things calmed down? I don't think these people go away. I feel like they're water. They always try to find a way to get out, to just go
absolutely
deep its darkest hole. So were there also outsiders coming into your community, or they basically some of them also live there? What was the tactic that they used?
So some of them were at that first initial meeting that went, to midnight. They did have people from other counties come, but they got tired. And that was one of the things too that we did. We outworked them and outorganized them. And it's possible. We also did like a vote library campaign where we asked everyone, all the way down to water and soil, what they thought about the library, sheriff too. I mean, everyone that was running for office. And then we put that out in the public. So we put the attention back onto, you're going to come for our books, we're going to come for your jobs. And that's when things started to change, right? Like, and they voted it did end up well, right? We voted to have our library funded for 2 full years without a single book removed, which is miraculous and not very common. A lot of times in these fights with school board or in other areas, books are banned, and we're incredibly grateful.
in other areas where they're actually able to take books in Virginia off the shelf. And this is where the comment Andrew had about red states. It's already, you can already see what the blueprint is because you see it in action. And so it's not like hypothetical. It's not like, well, you better vote this election or this will happen. It is happening. Even in Virginia, where we have had success, but because we had that success, we were able to stop some really bad things. But Texas, they've defunded the libraries totally. And they're, so this is concerning. Any last comments to the room about your experience of saving Samuels, which, it's so wonderful. What's happening now with your group and how can people get involved and maybe part of what, to learn what you're doing or help you?
We're now kind of just a banned book club, which is good. We it's good to kind of relax after such a long fight. But we, showing up in Shenandoah County for things like that. A lot of my Steve Samuels people are also on this blue journey with me, and went to, Shenandoah County last. So that, and red, wine, and blue is really the best way to get involved with what I'm doing on the state. So
yeah, I agree. And the troublemaker, join red, wine, and blue, get into good trouble.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you showing up and speaking up and organizing. And that is what it takes, I think, is really that. I think when you're in this room and you see it really is. I mean, in Shenandoah last night, and I don't know if Michelle McKinney wants to pop in real quick and talk about what happened in Shenandoah before. We can do that in the after chat too. But I'm curious, with so many people that were showing up in the majority that were against it, the school board voted, to still name it a Confederate, general, whoever they're naming the school after. And I just feel like that's really something that that's very frustrating when all the people don't want it, but just a few people that want it. And it's sort of, overwhelming to think what we need to do to change that in Shenandoah. Will it take a number of years? I don't know if you have because you're involved in that. What happened in Shenandoah?
So they voted 5-1 last night to keep the Confederate names, or to reinstate the Confederate names. They had removed them in 2020. But they campaigned on this idea of putting back those generals' names. And when you have this kind of idea of this is why I'm in the office, everyone thinks, well, it doesn't matter who's in this room because we elected you and the majority already spoke for you to put these on here. And that's not just in Shenandoah. I also heard that kind of rhetoric in Rockingham too. So when it comes to the school board issues, it really is election based. We have to get out and vote. We have to talk to our friends and get them out to vote. We have to get people to run. That's also another part of this piece is getting good candidates. Yeah.
No doubt. I agree, because I think that's one thing we learned in Bucks County in Pennsylvania. These people got in, they did a lot of damage, and the community, once they woke up, they did in the next round, got rid of everybody. And I think it will take time with folks like you organizing, with all of us coming together. So thank you, Kelsey, for coming in today. I hope you can stay in after chat, because I'm real excited to talk to Andra and both of you. So thanks everybody for tuning in. And Finale, do you want to come up? We'll talk about some good takeaways today. What are your thoughts on what we learned today? And then we can wrap up the show and go to after chat.
Yeah, I learned a lot today, and I learned just as much from Kelsey. And I have to tell you, I'm so inspired by Kelsey and everyone who showed up. I talked to Brad Skipper, Melissa Hartman, a lot about this when we were at the rural retreat, and I was just praying and hoping for something different. But it's okay, because we don't give up. But what I really learned today from Andra especially is to understand the language and to make sure that when you're asking questions, that you're asking the right questions. And so I think that's really important. And I think when I hear that, I also think about the conversation we had about how do you make sure that other people understand this and that it doesn't feel like this far-fetched thing, but that you show them through Tennessee and through Texas and through Florida with the book bans that we have here, the stances on abortion, that is already infiltrated and it's happening, and you got to stand up and do something about it.
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting too is when you're listening to other podcasts like The Bulwark and Republicans that are never Trumpers, they see it. They notice, they know right away that they want this idea of theocracy has been marching here. But the interesting part for me is this has been going on for a long time, like since Reagan, let's say, even before that. And this idea of the dancing with the devil and deciding that you are going to align yourself with this religious right conservative movement to win elections, and then give them free time on TV called evangelists and pastors that we all see. If you think about these folks that don't pay any taxes, they have these ministries that reach millions of people, and this was allowed to go on and still is going on. And this is a big issue that I think we need to like relook at how churches have the C3 status, how they can hide money, how who knows how many millions of dollars are going through churches that are funding bad things, and judges and courts and the Heritage Foundation. It's all connected. It's a little overwhelming, but truthfully, if you think about it, these folks want all this input on government. They pay nothing. They pay nothing and they take everything. So I don't know.
Katherine, I just think the point that you just made, is just so important and is so innovative. It's a different way about thinking about how we might approach this. And I always say that the answers for what we need are going to come from here. They're going to come from the meetings that we build solidarity and information and ideas here. But I think that is a really interesting way to think about it, is to think about no taxes, but you're speaking and you're trying to combine church and state together. So we should think about that. The other thing that I thought was
to say, Youngkin has a church in his house. That's interesting.
okay. See, there you go. And that's really bad. That's bad. But I think the other thing that I wanted to say, well, everyone can hear, is I just go back to Linda Hersham and what she says about making injustices public. And I think that there is a real opportunity for us to think more creatively about how we make things public. I mean, I think we try to do it, but really, are we really doing it that well? And so I'm just thinking that, through the conversations today, that we'll think more interestingly, more innovatively, more creatively about how we do some of the things we know we got to do, because it's just the everyday person who's not paying attention that we have to get their attention.
Yeah. And lastly, I'm going to end on two things, the Women's Summit again, and really bring up the idea that we are meeting because of democracy and freedom, because democracy, we always like to say, looks good on you. We're going to talk about why this is so important. When we talk about democracy in the evening, when we're having all these arts and different singers and different ways to express ourselves, it's because we want to explain to people what democracy means. It's a dance you do, the rap you give, we talk about what does democracy really look like? It's, I can sing a song. There was just an Iranian journalist going to be put to death because he spoke out for the women's rights stuff that was going on in Iran. We don't want this country. We didn't want journalism jailed. We want to be able to live our life and be free. And this is important. So that's why we're getting together. It's a big issue, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to have great speakers, and we're going to get out of that after June. Then we'll work together to make sure that in the fall, we will save our democracy. Just a little thing. It's not big, is it?
Okay, not big.
Okay, so next week, we're going to be on the move for Biden-Harris. Elizabeth Fireback is going to be here. She is the grassroots group for the Women for Biden-Harris. And we also have Tanya James will be here. She's the Virginia political and coalitions director for Biden for president. And we will have Virginia Beach political consultant Joel Rubin here. So next week, we're going to be on the move for Biden-Harris, making sure that, hey, look, we're voting for democracy and freedom. That's what it's about, and that's what we need to do. And make sure that you follow us on social media, listen to our podcast on Apple. If you're out there listening to us now, great, it's wonderful. We have Spotify, we're on also, and you could support our show. You could be a patron. After today, why not? We work hard all week long, all year long, bringing you the content on and about the issues that really will change what's happening in our country. And I think we can wrap up and head to the other side. If you have any last words, friend?
I want to say, ain't no stopping us now. So
ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move. I love it. And thank you to our guests, KELSEY Lawrence, co-founder of Save Samuels, and also we will be hearing in the after chat from Andra Watkins, the founder of the Substack, how Project 2025 will ruin your life.
Ruin your life.